Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Steve Ortega. I am a policy fellow with the El Paso Chamber. And today the Chamber, in conjunction with Workforce Solutions Borderplex, we're hosting a question and answer session with some transportation leaders here in the community of El Paso. This is part of a series of these types of events to get people better educated as to some of the big areas of policy that affect our community. Today in the area of transportation, we're lucky enough to have Eduardo Calvo, who is the Executive Director of the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization. We also have State Representative Lina Ortega, who has taken a keen interest in transportation as it relates to our community, but advocating at the state level for El Paso. As part of her role, she's also a member of the state's transportation, the House Transportation Committee. We also have Chairman Ted Houghton, who is the former chair, first and only El Pasoan to ever sit on the very powerful Texas Transportation Commission, has been very, very active in transportation issues affecting El Paso over the last 15 to 20 years. And even though he's not on the Texas Transportation Commission anymore, still very engaged in the issue. So I want to welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And for those of you who are viewing, this is going to be a primer on transportation organizations, transportation advocacy here in the El Paso region. And I will start off with Chairman Houghton and ask you, Chairman, over the next several minutes to give us a brief overview of how transportation is funded in the state of Texas. Oftentimes you have people on the roadways. They may not know whether or not the road that they're driving on is funded by the county, the city, the state, the federal government. Can you just give a brief overview as to how transportation is funded here in the state of Texas?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. There are several buckets. I call them buckets of transportation funding. Yeah, the basic buckets are when you go to your fill up your car. If you have a car that requires gasoline, it is federal and state dollars are collected right there. For those two buckets. Those are the biggest buckets that you have in transportation funding. The other one is motor vehicle registration. So when you go and have your car inspected every year, there's a fee there, motor vehicle registration fee that goes to the transportation funding. And the others are relatively new through constitutional amendments, and the constitutional amendment for oil severance tax, part of the oil severance tax, and part of the new car sales tax that gets also applied to those buckets. But the two largest are the when you fill up your car, like I said, if you have gasoline required vehicle, are the federal and the state taxes.
And Chairman, can you just a quick follow-up question? We may read in the newspaper or see on the news that the federal government has passed a new transportation legislation where money is thereby given to the states. How does the state of Texas then decide what projects get funded within the boundaries of the state of Texas?
Well, that has a lot to do with Eduardo. It basically, the MPOs were created as a local organization then to plan each region's transportation plans and construction and what is to be built, and then forwards those on not only to the state but to the federal government. So it's a local planning organization that says these are the roads or the transportation assets that are important to us, and they're funded. Then they're funded by formula. And the formula is based on a lot of things: motor vehicles registration in your community, and population, and travel, and how many people travel over those roads. So there's a lot of various funding options there that take place.
Okay, perfect segue. I'll next go to Mr. Calvo, again, Executive Director of El Paso's Metropolitan Planning Organization. Acronym that's used is MPO. But Mr. Calvo, can you tell us a little bit about the history of MPOs, and then what is the role, expounding on what Chairman Houghton said, what is the role of an MPO in a community?
Right. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I mean, following up on what Chairman Houghton just mentioned, MPOs are created by federal law. The law says that every urbanized area with more than 50,000 people has to have an MPO in order to be eligible to use federal and state money. So the MPOs do several things. One of the things is more technical nature. You know, we do forecast for the region so that we can, you know, try to plan and determine what the needs for transportation are going to be within the region in the next 20 to 25 years. So we do population forecast, employment, and all that. The other very important part of the puzzle is, like Chairman Houghton said, is that the MPO programs actually selects the programs that best satisfy those potential needs in the future, and we program them within our process, within the MPO documents. So regardless of a project being funded by with federal dollars or state dollars, or if a project is sponsored by the state, and in our case, the TxDOT, the state DOT, or the city or the county or a local government, every project has to be included in our plans and programs in order for them to be developed and implemented. So the role of the MPO is very important in terms of selecting projects, but at the same time, you know, programming them and making sure that they go into implementation.
Okay, thank you. And to Representative Ortega, as I mentioned at the onset, you have chosen transportation as one of your areas of focus as an elected official. Can you explain to the viewing audience why you chose transportation as a policy area of focus for your term in office?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to start off by explaining that many years ago, I was involved in an effort to bring more funding to our community. Some of you might be familiar with it. It was called the El Paso Court of Inquiry. We were appointed by a district judge to investigate and research certain areas in where it was obvious that the state was not appropriating adequate funding to El Paso. One of those areas was transportation. I'm about to start service as my third term at the state capitol. During my first session, my former colleague, Representative Pickett, was a member of the Transportation Committee. So I wasn't really involved in transportation at that time. At the start of my second session, he decided to retire, and I thought that that was a great time to step in and to continue to work on transportation. It's something that I know is very important to El Paso, and especially to my district. Part of my district covers part of the downtown portion, which of course is where I-10 is. And that's I-10 is for safety reasons and other reasons needs to be reconstructed. And it's a critical transportation investment that would be made on reconstructing I-10 because it's one of the main arteries of El Paso. And it also, and which is crucial, it helps facilitate international trade. It also serves in the movement of goods and services and people through the downtown area. Efficient transportation systems have the potential to drastically improve local, state, and international economies. I think El Paso's physical location makes it a right opportunity for investment, and it significantly is going to improve our local economy. So I decided to work on transportation. I know it's not a sexy subject, and it's rather complicated. As we just heard, there's certain buckets of funding, and there's certain formulas that are used with regard to allocation, but it's critical to El Paso. So I decided to go ahead and really tackle the area, and I'm happy that I am involved in it because it is very important and crucial to this community.
Awesome, and we thank you.
Steve, for the record, I have to say that I think that transportation is sexy.
I disagree with you.
One.
Okay. Many other policy areas
I'll
are
swing back
sexy.
over to Chairman Houghton. I just had lunch today with a historian who let me know that the first roads in El Paso were paved in the year 1905, right in front of the Cortez Hotel on Mesa Street. So there's a long history to funding of transportation projects here in the community of El Paso. But let's talk over, let's say, the last two generations, the last 30 years or so. How has El Paso fared when it comes to bringing in federal and state dollars to the community? Representative Ortega talked a little bit about the Court of Inquiry, and I know under your tenure as a member of the Transportation Commission, billions of dollars were brought into our community. But can you give us a summary of how you think, let's say over the last 30 years, we've done when it comes to bringing transportation dollars into our community?
Well, if you want to carve out the 12 years that I was there and set them aside, Eduardo knows more about the formulas than I do. I mean, I went through all of that, know what the formulas were. But the formulas are what they are, and there is a certain amount of dollars that get divided up amongst the metro areas. Well, let's just call it the state of Texas. Where we have never fared very well outside the 12 years is the discretionary dollars that are spent on transportation assets. And to the Court of Inquiry issues, and some of the examples that they used, like Paris, Texas, I remember that one, real well. Those, what you're looking at there is a discretionary dollar being spent outside that circle of formula dollars. We have really not fared very well with discretionary dollars. And in the past, and there in my opinion, there's a couple of reasons for it. One, I think the dynamic communities have a link between the public, the private sector, and when I say public, it's got to be a link between the MPO, TxDOT, and transportation advocates. I think in the last year, maybe 2 years. Since Lina's been on the committee, we formed a transportation coalition group of the private sector, basically, which has really never happened in the past. If you think through it, and Eduardo and Lina need to remember that we've never had that private side challenging the public side to say these are the things we need as a community to grow and to prosper. But every other community in the state of Texas, large communities, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, and even smaller communities, the Valley, when you look at Laredo and others, they have those coalitions that drive a lot of the politics. So when you talk about funding, it's those discretionary dollars. I can tell you that this district in the past, not recent past, has sent money back to Austin because they didn't want to do projects. I'm not saying couldn't be bothered with it, for whatever reason, sent those monies back and didn't do projects. And I think that has a lot to do with the coalition of the public-private, I call it the public-private sectors. So that's my long-winded version of funding. It's about discretionary, and it's about a collaboration in your community. Going to TxDOT and saying these are the things we want, and they like that collaboration. They like to see across the board there is general support of projects in our community.
Thank you. To Mr. Calvo, as Chairman Houghton said, the monies coming in are limited and in many cases discretionary. How is the MPO ensuring that the dollars that are coming in, and again, limited dollars, how are we ensuring that those limited dollars are being put to their best and greatest use for the El Paso community?
Right. Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, Steve, in the sense that, depends who you ask. you know, a project could be a good project or not a good project. You know, the best project, it's difficult to identify. However, it is very clear that you have to go through a selection process to make sure that your projects are really addressing the needs of the community, right? Like, you know, we do our models, we identify where we have congestion currently and in the future, and we select those projects. We also need to keep in mind that we've got a responsibility to the region to implement the projects that will ensure economic development for us. And you know, for us, it's very, very obvious, very apparent that I-10, for example, I-10 is our lifeline. It's the, you know, the spinal cord of our transportation system within El Paso. So, you know, projects that support the I-10 corridor are tremendously important for us, whether they're directly or indirectly. You know, the fact that in recent years and through the leadership of Chairman Houghton, we were able to complete the Border West Expressway, which was that missing link to complete a parallel route to I-10 through the downtown area. So yeah, I mean, that gives us a lot of you know, redundancy, but it also gives us a lot more reliability to our system, because in the past, if there's an accident or something happening on I-10, you know, close to the downtown area, the whole system collapses, right? So we've got to make sure that we do select the best projects that have regional impact. But we are using, in the last couple of years, we've been using also a more quantitative approach to establish and measure, compare projects, evaluate projects, and make sure that we are selecting the top priorities for the region.
And I think it's fair to say that we've done a pretty good job. El Paso currently does not have the congestion of other communities like Houston, Austin, Dallas, San Antonio. Not to say that that can't come, but I think planning, as you stated, plays a big role in making sure that our traffic systems are functioning properly. I'm going to swing back to Representative Ortega. You are the vice chair of the policy board for the MPO. And as I stated earlier, you're also on the state's House Transportation Committee. As a policy maker, what are some of the ways that you can affect the future of transportation in El Paso? Is that listening out to community groups? Is that meeting with experts? Is it driving the roadways yourself and figuring out what you think needs to be done? How do you formulate what you think needs to be done in terms of El Paso's transportation future?
That's a lot of different questions. I'll try to answer all of them. First, let me start as a state representative. I've got a unique opportunity because I do sit on the House Transportation Committee. Aside from being able to file legislation or to vote on important transportation bills, this all can help and result in better funding for our community, as well as potentially policy outcomes that are favorable to El Paso. As a member of the House Transportation Committee specifically, I'm able to communicate directly with the commissioners on the Texas Transportation Commission, who, as we know, are responsible for decisions actually related to transportation funding. And I think that this is so important right now because we don't have our chair of transportation from El Paso sitting on that commission anymore. When Chairman Houghton was on the commission, I mean, he was able to really do a lot for El Paso. Currently, none of the commissioners are from this community, so it's important to be an advocate to those commissioners on local projects and what our priorities are for this community. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. And then you asked about in terms of, I also sit and I'm vice chair of the MPO, and that helps me stay connected at the local level with other local elected officials, as well as policy board members. And it provides me an opportunity to work with Mr. Calvo, who became the MPO executive director within the last 2 years. And let me tell you, he has made a lot of changes. He has been very effective in terms of what he has been doing, But this gives me an opportunity to work with him and the other members of the policy board so that we can form what I would say a more cohesive and strong vision for transportation projects in our region. Kind of like what Chairman Houghton said a little while ago is, I think that within the last couple of years, our community has been more united when it comes to supporting priority projects in El Paso. And one of the reasons that this is so important is because I had an opportunity a couple of years ago to talk to administrators from the transportation, the state transportation department. And one of the things that they told me was that they really did not know what the priority projects were for El Paso. And they wanted to see a united voice on what we wanted. And I think because of all of the great work that is happening locally and with Chairman Houghton, with our executive director, with different local governmental entities, as well as other organizations, I think that the state TxDOT knows what El Paso now needs, because we are speaking united and we're talking in one voice. So it also, being part of the MPO, and I know you asked a lot of questions, but I'm going to say one more thing. That is, I get involved with transportation advocates locally, and I work with them as well, because it's important to really get out there and educate people as to how we have to work together in order to achieve what we want on transportation, which again is crucial to this community.
Very good. Mr. Calvo, I'm going to go back to you. You're keeping, as part of your role as the executive director, you're keeping up to date on the latest transportation trends, and certainly the COVID crisis has created some speculation as to what that does to the way people commute. You have climate change. You have the introduction of autonomous vehicles. What are some things that communities, to include El Paso, can be thinking about now in terms of transportation infrastructure, based on some of the trends that you're seeing and that may be coming to fruition over the next 5, 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, so Steve, I think right now one of the bigger changes, and which really creates opportunities for us as a result of COVID, and you see the changes in the global supply chains. There's a lot of talk about the companies trying to come back to this side of the world and establishing operations in Mexico. So for us being here on the border, that opens up a tremendous opportunity. And again, that may be a direct result of the pandemic, all this nearshoring. So it is very important for us to make sure that our border infrastructure is working, much better than what it is right now. And it really means funding to improve the cross-border movement of goods and people. Again, tremendous opportunity that we have here against other border regions, in the sense that we have the maquilas across in Ciudad Juarez that generate products of higher value, right? So we may not have as much traffic as other ports of entry, but the stuff that we generate here is higher value. So it really generates a lot more economic activity for the state of Texas, and for the country for that matter. So, those are some of the opportunities that we have to take advantage of, because we are in direct competition with the rest of the state. I mean, that's following on what Chairman Houghton said at the very beginning, and it is very important to have this united front, as Representative Ortega said, because we are competing for dollars against the other metropolitan areas in the state. We compete against other border communities along the state. So we have to make sure that we have a very strong message where we identify our priorities, we have consensus, and we are able as a whole to communicate that message, whether it's the MPO, whether it's elected officials, whether it's the private sector through the Mobility Coalition, the state delegation led by Rep. Ortega. All of us have to do our part but communicate the same message consistently and strongly, because that's what other communities do. And if we don't do it, they're going to be eating our lunch.
Yeah. Okay, very good. And I'm going to next go to Chairman Houghton. Chairman Houghton, you just heard Mr. Calvo speak about the dynamics of global trade, of nearshoring. We've just had the passage of USMCA that went into effect this past July. And some of the viewers may have been reading a little bit about the downtown I-10 widening project. Can you explain to those who are watching in today, where does downtown widening fit into El Paso's transportation future, and why, more importantly?
Well, the why is it's pretty obvious when you drive it. We call it in the transportation world the throat of the dragon. That's where everything narrows up to 3 lanes, and you're restricted going through there. So you have an accident in the downtown in that trench or the throat of the dragon. You stop traffic on I-10, whatever direction you're headed, wherever that accident occurs. And we saw that we see it quite, frequently with fender benders, but we saw the shutdown of I-10 with a truck going up on side of the embankment and taking out a bridge, and it shut down the interstate for a while and things kind of ground to a halt. So that gives you an idea regarding the alternatives that need to be developed and why I-10 needs to be expanded and have the access roads. If people, and I know they drive I-10 all the time, but when they observe from downtown headed west, we do not have active access roads like we do on the east side of town. And that is important. That's important from moving traffic away from the interstate. If there is an occurrence of an accident or a shutdown of I-10, where we don't have that on the west side, we have that on the east side. And that was omitted during the build out of I-10 back in the 60s. And that's the unfortunate part. So widening I-10 is important for volume purposes and for trade purposes. We've got to have throughput. Right now, the throughput slows down in a normal economy where people are traveling, and for safety. And safety is one of the key components, is allowing traffic to get through safely. And right now, gets a little dicey through there when you only have 3 lanes.
Yeah, and you're very familiar with the project that's coming up in Austin to address their issues on I-35, a result of them not planning back 20, 30 years ago. And now they're dealing with a $6, $7, $8 billion fix.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part. They did 20 or 30 years ago say, if we don't build it, they won't come. They'll stay away. And we want to keep Austin quaint and small. Well, guess what? It didn't work. And now you're limited to the points to where you can build, because it's too expensive to condemn private property along that corridor and widen it out. And that's the bad news regarding that project. There's really no real fix in Austin. They voted down several times mass transit, rail projects, light rail projects. Unlike Dallas and Fort Worth that have multiple rail projects to move their people around, Houston is late to the game on those types of rail projects too. So we're a growing state. We need to confront, the realities of a growing state.
Yeah, and we are fortunate in El Paso that we currently don't have the traffic issues that other communities have in the state, but that doesn't mean it's always going to be that way.
One thing I wanted to say, Steve, regarding the first question about transportation funding, and Eduardo knows this, not all monies raised through gas tax and other means goes to asphalt and concrete. It goes to other things, and the other things are enhancement projects. And to give you an example of enhancement projects, we've done the aesthetic work downtown, the new wrought iron, the pretty paint jobs to modernize. One of the biggest ones we did that many people may not be aware of, we put over $10 million of enhancement money into the Centennial Plaza at UTEP. And you can use enhancement when we say dollars there, because you've got foot traffic, people traveling by foot and bicycles, so you accommodate that. So there are other buckets of funding for types of projects around the state, and one of those is the trail, that the Paso del Norte Trail that's being developed along the ditch banks of El Paso Irrigation District. They're using those types of federal and state dollars to provide the enhancement dollars. I mean, those projects through enhancement dollars.
Awesome, very good. And I'm gonna segue from that widening question to you, Representative Ortega. You've been one of the lead advocates, along with public sector, private sector, nonprofits, on the question of potentially placing a park over the downtown I-10 area. Can you explain from your perspective why you think that's an important project for the community to realize?
Well, let me start by saying that we have to reconstruct I-10. Kind of like what Chairman Houghton just said, there's concerns, safety concerns, and we've got congestion that occurs. And if we're in the process of redeveloping or reconstructing I-10, then having a park above I-10 is something that will benefit everyone in our community. And it's the downtown deck would be, there's other communities that have these type of decks. And so it's not something that's going to be new. It's been proven to be a successful type of a project to do in other urban communities. And it's really a unique type of approach that we have to modernize a transportation type of development in central El Paso. The project is going to also help improve our health and the appearance of the downtown area. I think that since we're going through a pandemic, I think we all have an appreciation for the outdoors right now. And we all understand how important it is to have some green spaces in our community. This deck park has the ability to offer another space for community enjoyment and for people to get together and just to have lots of fun in the downtown area. And again, going back to a pure economic type of view, it's going to help small businesses, large businesses in the surrounding area, because there'll be a financial benefit from having more activity in downtown. And it's going to be attractive to potentially bringing in new businesses into this area, when that's something that El Paso needs. I think we all know that most successful urban communities have vibrant downtowns, and we want to keep our young professionals. And this is a great place. If we have more businesses to keep them, it's a place where they can work and they can also live. I think that the other thing that hasn't been brought up is that it unites the Sunset Heights with the downtown area. So it's a really exciting project, and it's great that we're talking about it, because it's the right time to actually do it. So yes, I am very supportive of bringing a cap to I-10.
Very good. We're going to end up with an audience question. I think it's most appropriate for you, Representative Ortega, but we have a question from Calvin Croker, who's a local businessman involved in transportation. And he wants to know, how can he support or do a better job of supporting elected officials who understand the complexity of these transportation questions. It really is an area of expertise. There are a lot of, as Chairman Houghton said, different formulas, different acronyms, different organizations, different streams of funding. But Calvin wants to know how he can do, or how he can better support elected officials who are involved in this particular area.
Well, I think that there's many times that there's individuals in El Paso that can get involved in the process. For instance, there was commentary time periods that were open recently when the commission was going to be looking at the UTP, the Unified Transportation Plan. And it's always, to me, it's always exciting when people in this community get involved in something like that in Austin. I mean, El Paso is the farthest community from the capital, and many people go and advocate for their communities in Austin. And I'd love to have individuals, businesses, organizations become more involved in transportation, and to be there and to explain to commissioners or to other state house members or to senators as to what type of funding that we need and projects that are important not only to El Paso, but to the state of Texas as well as to the US. So it's really advocating for El Paso and helping us out.
Awesome. I want to thank each of you for your participation today. I think Chairman Houghton said it best when he said we're now coming together as a community. I also think it's fair to say we have a long ways to go. Some of these efforts have already been established in some of the communities that we're competing against in the state of Texas for transportation dollars. So a lot of work still needs to be done, but certainly happy that El Paso has had recent success, and certainly happy that each of you are involved in transportation advocacy for our community. So thank you again. Also, thank you to Workforce Solutions Borderplex. Layla Melendez does a great job overrunning that organization. And also want to thank the El Paso Chamber and David Jerome, who has stuck his neck into the transportation game, just trying to bring the community together so that we're marching in the same direction. I'm going to sign off for now. And again, thanks everyone for watching, and thank you to the participants this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.